Brenda was willing to reorganize her life a little bit, and she will be doing today's on project management, and then in November, I think November 7th is when we have the next one scheduled, which is on time management. I did
Yes.
remember to open the recording. Again, my name's Sharon Moreland. This is Southeast Kansas Library System, and our speaker today is Brenda Haug. So Brenda, thank you.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Hi, everyone. I now work at the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library, so that's where I am now, is my office there. And I always do time management first and then project management second. So this is interesting to do it this other way, and I actually kind of like it. So this maybe was a happy accident that it turned out this way. All right, so as we get started, I'm curious if you would share in the chat, and you don't have to use an emoji, just you can use words. Do you like managing projects? Are you a person who likes managing projects? And I'm going to take a look at the chat. Nope. Okay, yes, good. Excuse me. Kind of in that neutral zone, like it. Yep. Okay, yeah, just as I expected, they were both. We have people who love it and people who don't love it. It's something we all have to do in some form, and I do think that there are people who are drawn to the Myers-Briggs. I know isn't in favor as much right now, but in that it has two types, the planner type and then the ones who are really good in the present moment. And I think library work we do both. If you're working a desk, or just if you're a manager, you need to be in the moment responding to needs that come up. And some people really thrive on that and they're good at like troubleshooting, and then other people really like projects where you set out a schedule. And then a lot of us are somewhere in between. So, but I do think it's something, there are tools that all of us can use. It's something that we all have to do. And that's what we'll talk about today. So, what is a project? I want to start by defining that. And this is the official, we're going to talk about the Project Management Institute, but this is their official definition, is that it's any temporary endeavor with a definite beginning and end. So it has that clear start and end. It can be a long project, like if any of you have ever done a major remodel or been part of a new library building, that kind of thing, that's years, but it does have a start and it does have an end. And it's always about something new, something that did not previously exist. So it's a one-time, once-off activity that won't be repeated in exactly the same way. And we'll talk about that. I have a couple examples. So projects, we're talking about project management, which is different than processes. So, which is things we routinely do, not a one-time activity. So in libraries, these are the types of things we might do. Kids library remodel, that would be a project. Pulling the holds list, that's a process. Summer reading program, that really is kind of both project and process, because it's unique every year, but also if you've done it for several years, you do develop a lot of processes that you might replicate from year to year. So I would say that one actually is both project and process. So big thing is that it's that has a clear start and beginning. It's that temporary endeavor. This is something, this Ranganathan is an Indian librarian, mathematician. He's a big deal in India. On his birthday, that's National Librarian Day, but he has these 5 laws that I know resonate with lots of people who come across them, with a little updating, because library is about so much more than books. So books are for use. Anybody seen these before? Yes, yeah. So the one that really fits with project management is the 5th one. A library is a growing organism. So always changing, always new things. And that's where project management comes in. So it could be, I think the biggest project is a new building, maybe a new automation system, big major remodel, also projects like creating a story walk or grants, digitizing a collection. What's a project that you have going on or upcoming? What's one, get some examples that are from you. So if you would share in the chat, it can be, maybe someone has a big one. Anybody have a building or remodel? What's some project that you have coming up? Are you planning a staff day?
I don't think Seth is here, but Frontenac is in the process of building a new library.
Okay. Oh, an inherited expansion project. That's a good one. Jot that down. So
Well, they're
remember.
brand new. They've never had a library in that community before.
Ah, okay.
It is truly from the ground up.
Wow.
Howard has an expansion project that Emma inherited in Elk County.
Okay.
They're doubling in size.
What else? What are other people? Anybody writing a grant for anything or thinking about writing a grant?
At Kincaid, they're working on expanding a little bit and creating a teen
Ooh,
scene room.
teen scene, Morgan's teen scene. Okay. Emma, always writing grants. Yeah, I feel like a lot of project management, grant writing and project management go well together because often the grant application, what it asks you to do is really think like a project manager.
Yeah.
Kevin Flooring, good.
Yeah, Coffeyville is looking to add either
Nice.
onto their library for a makerspace. Okay, good. I didn't know, Rachel. I knew you guys were thinking makerspace, but Darren said you might be looking off-site too, so. Cool.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so true or false, using project management tools and skills makes project management easy. I'm guessing you can assume that that is false. It is false. It is never easy because it's just a lot of work, especially some of these projects that you've mentioned. I mean, those are major and stuff always happens. So the flooring, of course, things can happen with the supplier, with your contractor, with when you need to close the library and what that looks like. It's just never going to be easy. A new makerspace. It's fun and it's exciting, and I think that can help us kind of stay motivated, but it will never be easy. But I think what project management tools can do and skills is just help it feel less overwhelming, help you get things out of your head. Who said they inherited? I think Emma inherited a project, a major project. And so I think project management can help you create documentation that is helpful if you end up not being there the whole way through the project. So there are tools that can help with communication, with collaboration, and I'm always looking for those things that get it out of your head and down so that you have a record of it. Okay. So yes, can help so you feel less overwhelmed. Another thing that project management tools can do is to kind of help keep things rolling. Because often I think we have a fuzzy idea about something that we'd like to do, but we're kind of waiting for the right time and we're always busy with other stuff. So project management can kind of get us going, especially with those baby steps that it really takes to get projects done. So the tools can help with that too. What else? It can help with another thing that I see happen in libraries is that one person finds it easier to just do it rather than delegating it. And project management can help you delegate a little bit better. So you're not just doing everything yourself, but you really are approaching things as a team. So I think those are all things that a project manager or project management tools can help with. So this is small p, small m project manager. It's often a role rather than an official title. I do think there are big libraries more and more that have project managers on staff where that's actually officially in their title. Anybody here have it as part of their title? We have program coordinator, but we do not have project manager. Lots of us in libraries do not have formal training. Close the chat. But usually someone who is the project manager, the person who takes this on, often is someone who's organized and has good follow through. If you have those things, that is a great start, because a lot of what project management is just keeping at it. But I think in addition to that, it's someone who's collaborative and a good communicator, and you also have to be really flexible. So sometimes being a person who's really organized and good at planning, we're less good at being adaptable and flexible, but really the project management requires both of those things. Okay, so this is capital P, capital M project manager. There is the Project Management Institute, and they certify people as project management professionals. And it's a big process, and lots of tests you take, courses you take to get there, and it's very prescribed. There are right answers to all the questions. And so I feel like most of us don't need this level of structure for the projects that we're doing, but I also feel like there's a lot we can take from them and adapt to our needs. So without needing to full on get the project management professional certification, there are things we can take, and I'm going to share a lot of them. So what do you think about this? If you are the only person working on something, is it still a project? Or does a project really imply a team? What do you think? I'm gonna just say yes, it is still a project. There are one-person projects, there are personal projects that you do, and I think, again, I'm not coming at this as project management professionals. I'm coming at this, let's find and use the tools that are genuinely useful for us, and you can adapt them. So I'm going to talk about a lot of tools for your big projects. I think that most of them could be useful. For a smaller project, it might really be more limited what you actually use. But when you are in charge of a project, even if you're the only person working on it, I think following the processes, being intentional about those things can, again, help keep the project rolling, help it be a success. Okay, so this is from the Project Management Institute. These are the 5 phases of project management, and I'm going to go through each of these. And again, I'm going to talk about some of the tools that can be used at each of these, and I encourage you to think about adapting them to what would genuinely be useful to you. And I'm going to talk about how I've done that, or I've seen it done too. So initiating, planning, executing, and then the monitoring and controlling happen throughout, and then closing. And this is a process that, whether you had these terms or not, projects that you've worked on, you have gone through these phases. Starting with initiating, and this is the why. At the very beginning of a project, you establish why you're doing it, and you get buy-in from all of the stakeholders. There's a form or a couple of tools in this that I think are useful for this: project charters and stakeholder registers. And again, you may have done something like this even if you didn't call it project charter or stakeholder register. So this is one we actually do use here at Topeka Public, and I think is very useful. Has anyone else using a project charter? Do you have one for your library that you use? Project charter? No. I really recommend this for different reasons. And it can be just as simple, it can be a one-page document. But right from the start, it gets you to create a title for the project, and it gets you to identify who is the project manager. So this often happens to me. I'll brainstorm with someone and we'll get excited about an idea. For example, we're getting certified as being sensory inclusive. And so the youth services librarian is excited about that and the public services manager. But so we're going to work on that. Identifying, okay, who actually is the project manager is very useful because that person they know that they're the one who's supposed to be kind of getting the ball rolling and keeping it rolling too. Another important thing is to write out the purpose. And I think, again, even if you are working on a project alone, it can be really useful to articulate that, to get it out there, because then you may have a director. So I'm guessing a number of you are directors, but if not, you may have a director and you want to be sure they understand what you're proposing to do. Or you may have a board who you want to be sure they understand what you're doing. So it really gets you to articulate what you're doing and again, get it out of your head and then share it. And you'll be surprised often how people weren't quite getting what you were going to do until they see it written out. So it helps you get on the same page. Another thing that I would include in a project charter, and again, this is just one I took off of the internet. If you do a search for project charter template, you will find a lot. And I would say the simpler, the better. And I would share ours, but I actually don't love it. And I think it's a little bit overcomplicated. So, but another section it has here is the scope, and that's the boundaries around what you're going to do. So you getting clear about the goals and what you're going to do helps you also clarify what you're not going to do. Because one of the things that often happens with projects is that there is scope creep. So you started with this one thing that you were going to do, and maybe it goes well. And so it starts taking on a life of its own and it keeps growing, which can be okay. But I think then, so let's say you are, you have some program, like you're going to do a parenting class, a 6-week parenting class, and it's a new thing. You're going to work with community partners to do this. So in the scope, you would write that you're going to deliver this 6-week parenting class in partnership with parents or as teachers. And as you're doing that, it's really successful and people start talking about, well, it would be really great to do this, or another thing we need is this. And having this, it doesn't mean that you're not going to do those things, but it gets you to be real about, okay, that we can do that, but it will require more time, more money, looking again at who's going to do what. So the project charter, I think one of the biggest things it can do is just really get you to be clear about what you're going to do, what the goals are, and get on the same page about that. And then you can refer back to this as you're working on the project.
Brenda, do you think this in scope, out of scope is also a way to help with not feeling quite so overwhelmed?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we do it to ourselves a lot of the time. You'll start working on something and it's going well and people get excited about a part of it. So then more ideas come up. And another thing that happens is then projects never end, So then, which is maybe fine too, but then I think that's part of why we feel a little bit overwhelmed all the time, is that we have all these things we started and they are still kind of rolling or really rolling. And so we just have so many things that we're juggling, where I think projects are supposed to have a start and then an end. And if it's going to become an ongoing thing, then we need to be sure that we have the resources for that, including time and staff. Okay, the other thing, so project charters, if I had to pick one tool, I would really pick this because it can be one page, and I think it really gets you right from the start to be sure that you're clear about what you're doing. And it does that identification of, okay, who is the point person for this? Who is the project manager? The other thing is called a stakeholder register, which it really is just a contact list. So thinking about I don't know, the brand new building in Frontenac or Emma's expansion, just creating one central place where you have all of everybody's who's related to the project, their name, their email address, maybe their phone number, maybe their cell phone number, if depending on what their role is, putting those into a central place. And I think it's useful because then you're not searching through emails trying to find that. But it also helps, again, if there's turnover in a project, because you can turn that over. You can also take notes too about whatever it might be, when people work, what their role is in the project, when anything that would be useful. So again, this is just one pulled from the internet. I don't actually call it a stakeholder register when I work on projects, but I just create a contact sheet because I do find it very useful to pull together all of the people. And it also is good to get you to think about who the stakeholders are who are maybe a little bit less hands-on involved, but who really needs to know, because we're going to talk about communication, and it can be helpful if you have this register to go through your contact list, stakeholder register, and think about who do I need to inform as you're working on the project, if that makes sense. So at this initiation stage, I think the two big things are the project charter, so you really get clear about the why, and then that stakeholder register. So that's initiating, getting started with a project. Then we move into planning, and this is the biggest, probably one of the harder parts of the project is this part. And this is when you get more into the nitty-gritty of what the project will look like. So it's the what you're going to do, how, when, and there's something called the work breakdown structure. And again, this is very useful. So my favorite way to do this is if you're planning something, and especially if you can do this with others. So maybe, let me see one of those, the makerspace. So let's say you're creating a new makerspace in the library. If you have a team that's working on that, and you're at this planning phase, you would get that team together and really just start. I love Post-it notes. You'd start brainstorming all of the things that are going to go into it. What are the things between where we are now and that completed makerspace? What are the things that need to happen? And it's kind of overwhelming because there's lots of stuff, lots of equipment, lots of training of staff and promotion, all of those things. But if you start brainstorming with these Post-it notes, then you can start to categorize them. I think I put it, yeah. And you'll start to see that, okay, these are all the things that are related to marketing. These are all the things related to selecting and purchasing equipment. These are all the things related to staff training, that kind of thing. And then you can start creating these categories, and you can also start looking at dependencies. So what needs to happen before what, which things have specific dates that they need to happen by. So don't do a Harry Potter night. I just read about a library that got in trouble with Warner Brothers. It shut them down for doing a Harry Potter night. So I have to change my example. Does that make sense, the work breakdown structure? All right. Feel free to ask questions anytime, or if you have done anything like this, I'd be curious to know about that too. I really like how flexible the Post-it notes are, because you can throw it away. You can. Okay. So from those, after you do this, then you create your project plan. So this is like the whatchamacallit, the project charter, but it's way more fleshed out. So it includes those things that you put in the work breakdown structure. You now start putting those into a plan. And again, sorry, depending on the size of the project, this can look very different. The project plan for a brand new library will be many, many pages. The project plan for a Harry Potter night might be just a couple of pages. But I think at this point, you really start to get more nitty-gritty again about that, what, how, and when, and also the who. At this point is when you can start to identify who is going to do what. And this can be really simple. It can be a table like this. It can be a more narrative document, or at least parts of it can be. And one thing I love about that is once you create a fleshed out project plan, you can pull from it. So when you get to the marketing, you can pull from what you've written in your project plan. When you are providing updates to stakeholders, you can pull from your project plan. So it really can become this central document, and it needs to be regularly reviewed and updated. But I think it's really important to have a place where you have sketched this out. And there's a tool that I like called a Gantt chart. Is this something people are using? Gantt charts? It's an Excel spreadsheet. Actually, you can do this in Google Sheets too. But what it really is it just takes all those Post-it notes and you put them into a spreadsheet. So all your tasks are listed along in that left column. List all your tasks there. Again, this can be adapted depending on if it's a solo project. You don't have to have the assigned to, but if you're working on this as a team, put down who is assigned to, and then start sketching out when these things happen, or putting it into a bar graph like this. And it helps you then if there are dependencies. So if the makerspace example, let's do that again. So if you have one of these is your equipment ordering, you're going to order a Cricut machine for the makerspace, and you have training scheduled for the Cricut machine. Of course, if something happens and the Cricut machine delivery is delayed, then you'll see in here that you need to adapt when the training is going to happen. So I like these. I'm not one of those people who just loves Excel, and but I do really like this. I like being able to see all of those tasks and the timeline together. I think it's really, really helpful. And again, if you just open up Excel and use the templates in Excel, there are Gantt chart templates, and Google Sheets, if you're a Google user instead, those also have, there's also a Gantt chart template in there. Any questions about that?
I've seen these before, but I didn't know what they were called.
Yeah, I think people it's a spreadsheet. And so I think that people are like, oh, not everybody. Some people just love spreadsheets, but it really is, to me, it's so handy to be able to see it all together like that and to recognize, also to look at who's been assigned what. And I think that that helps. If I think a lot of what you do as a project manager is also herding herding cats or whatever. It's helping people stay on track. We're actually going to talk about that when we get to the monitoring and controlling. So, okay, so we got started with our project charter and our stakeholder register. In planning, it really is about creating that plan, whether that's a Gantt chart or whether you do it as more of just a table or I mean, it could be if you did the post-it thing, it could just be something that went up on a whiteboard. It can be as flexible. It can be what you need it to be for the nature of the project and also the nature of how you and your team work together. Okay, initiating planning. The next thing is executing. That's where you actually do it. And as the project manager, a lot of what you do at this point is really just make sure things are clicking along. Other people who have responsibilities are following through on those. And that might mean sending them reminders before it's due, checking in after it's due, a lot of just communication like that. There's a term that's used in project management called cadence. And I feel like that's one of the most important things that a project manager does is kind of establishes that rhythm. And you have to be careful to keep it like a good steady rhythm, but not be too much, because often you may be the project manager of this and people are working on it, but it might be a smaller part of what they're doing. And so I think, again, going back to what is a project manager, being adaptable, being flexible, being realistic. Sometimes it's also about helping other people recognize how much time the thing they're accountable for, how much time that thing will take. I think sometimes people avoid things, but if they recognize that it would just take like 20 minutes of focus for them to get it done, that can help people with that sort of setting of timelines. And then another thing during this phase is tracking and addressing issues. So I'll talk about that. So a big way that we kind of both establishes accountability, but also set that cadence is by having project meetings. I'll talk about those a little bit. And I think that's where you establish that rhythm of the project. And I'm always careful not to over meet, but probably err a little bit too much on the side of not meeting, or of meeting a little bit less than we should. But I think there's something called standing meetings that I think is useful. If you're regularly meeting, you might want to have a standing meeting where it's just a quick check in on things that have happened. It could be whether people were able to accomplish the things they were supposed to accomplish, or if any issues came up, talk about those. But standing meetings would be just the kind of thing where you actually stand in some organizations because you're going to keep it quick. It's going to be a 5-10 minute check-in instead of always needing to be like an hour. Sometimes it does need to be an hour, but and okay. Issues logs, I think especially for the bigger projects, it's important to have some way that you're tracking issues. So for the makerspace project, definitely for the building projects, I think that would be the kind of thing you would want to track. And there are lots of ways you could do that. Again, I think it just helps with getting things out of your head, because you don't want to be carrying the whole project in your head. You want to have it out there so other people can help with it, and also so you can communicate about it too. I think part of the cadence is, especially with a big project, is establishing regular communication. And you can pull from your stakeholder register to remember who you should be communicating with, refer back to your project plan, and you can even actually pull sections right from that. But something big like, or actually, it doesn't even have to be big. It could be, but I think regular updates on project, if you're really working on the Makerspace project, for example, that's a big focus right now. You might even want to send weekly updates. Here's where we're at. Here's just to keep people, it helps people also know to expect that communication. Um, I sometimes like to do it in less of a narrative form, which I think something about our brains, we just kind of scan over the paragraphs sometimes without really reading what's in them. So this format that you see on the screen where there's a bulleted list or there's a table that highlights where you're at right now, highlights any issues, I think that can be something that kind of people pay more attention to it too. But I do like making it regular, maybe including reports from others. So regular communication is really important. Anybody have examples of how they've done that? Like weekly updates or a place on your website where you're posting updates about project. Anybody doing anything like that with these projects that you've talked about?
We don't have it for projects, but I took the dashboard idea from
Oh,
Pacer and
uh-huh.
always have a dashboard related to our strategic plan. So that's my
Yes.
little spreadsheet that I update 3 or 4 times a year. So
Yeah.
kind of like this.
Yes, definitely the same kind of. Okay. So we've initiated, we've planned, we've executed this monitoring and controlling. That's a big part of what the project manager does throughout is to look at the plans that you set and then check in on reality. So you're looking at a scope. Are we staying within scope? If we're not, can we pull back and get back to scope, or can we make adjustments? Is it at a point where we need to make adjustments in budget or timeline? So those are two things to check on too. Those key performance indicators. Are we on schedule? Are we within budgets? Are people happy with the quality so far of what we're seeing? Are people staying engaged with it? And I think, again, that's that cadence, helping to keep the cadence going. So monitoring and controlling, those things happen just throughout the project. And then the last part is closing. And this is the part that I feel like libraries, we tend to be so busy and I feel like I frequently have worked on projects where by the time you finish one, you're already starting the next one. And so it just kind of either fizzles or not much happens. And I think if we don't close projects well, for one thing, they can just go on and on, they don't end, or it's not sure where it fits, if it's going to continue, is it going to become something that becomes the children's librarian, something they regularly do or they keep up, or fizzles out, or people feel unappreciated. So they put all of this work into something and then it's done and that doesn't really get acknowledged or celebrated. And so closing a project well, sometimes you have to complete a final report. So if it was a grant-funded project, you often have to complete a final report. And I kind of like that because it does get you to go back and look at what you said you were going to do and really communicate how it went. The plus delta, so final report, you look at what you did, what you learned. It's important to have that reflection too about what you did. I think it can help you with your next project. Plus delta, this is something that's part of the culture or way projects are approached here is doing this at the end of things, is to look at the pluses. So what went well, and then what could we have done better? So I think that's a way to approach it too, but taking the time to do that. And then some things, just a celebration. And so opening the new makerspace, having that be a party. Of course, new library grand opening events or major remodel. But for other projects too, I think if a collection was digitized or a program was successful, how about the next day just even taking a few minutes to thank the team that was part of it? I think anything that kind of helps the project close well also helps people feel like you accomplished something, feel like the work you do matters, and helps you feel more excited about the next project too. So closing well, that might it to me it feels like a place where definitely I could spend more time and know that I'm always glad when I do. Okay, so here's those 5 phases. Initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and conclosing. So as you look at this and think about your projects, is there anything here that feels like something what appeals to you, or what feels like something you might do? Or maybe there's something that you've intuitively been doing, but you haven't really had a name for it. Just curious if what resonates, I guess, or what feels like something you might try or you might look at. And you can either share in the chat, or if you want to unmute, that's okay too. Anything?
Emma had shared in the chat earlier that she's going to try to start a library newsletter to highlight
Oh,
progress on
good.
the
Yes. Yes.
for Iola, we've had a really successful grant project, and I feel like we haven't celebrated our Feeple play space. So I think maybe we'll do a birthday party of the play space or something like that to really celebrate um, that project and the end of this 3-year grant.
Mm-hmm. Good. Good. What else? Anybody?
I keep thinking of projects around my house
Yes.
that need to be done where I could actually utilize this technique. So it applies not only at work.
It really does. It really does. It fits. It's the way projects flow. And it doesn't always just go in a linear process like this. Like you might get into the planning and realize like, oh my gosh, this is too much, or this is not going to work, or we really found a better way. So you kind of go back to the start. Things can majorly change as you're going, but I think that overall this is how they go. This is how things flow, whether it's something at home or something at work, big or small. And I think that it can help to have processes because it helps with other people too. So if you have staff that you supervise, manage, or volunteers even, for them to be able to see, because we can carry so much in our heads. And so for other people to have it laid out, I think that's really helpful and really, really powerful. I think also one of the things that we've started doing here in Topeka is our project charters. They go into a shared folder that anybody can access. And so there's just I guess a level of accountability for that, that if be like, oh, well, we started that work to become certified as a sensory inclusive organization, but nothing has happened with it. And that was supposed to, I feel like there's just a level of accountability, and that could be a physical place. It could also help you realize, so if you have a whiteboard or um, bulletin board or whatever, where you put up your project charters, I think it could help you realize that, okay, we're good for now, and then we'll start something new after we take some of these some of these other pages off the board. So I think it can help in that way too.
Well, and with that, it flows into the strategic plan. I mean, it flows into
Yes.
your dreams for the future.
Yep.
And you talked about accountability, but I would say it's also transparency. So,
Mm-hmm.
maybe sharing that charter with your community so that, maybe there's some stakeholders out there that you didn't know were out there for the
Right.
makerspace or somebody owns a flooring business who happens to love the library, but you didn't know that.
Right.
Things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say transparency with your community as well, and your board, of course.
Yes. And that cadence part, I feel like that is one of the most important things, is just keeping it rolling, even if you need to slow down the cadence sometimes, because you can tell people just have pretty limited bandwidth for it, but keeping it rolling. That is, I feel like, one of the biggest things that a project manager does is keeps moving forward, keeps making progress, and kind of tests that rhythm. You don't want it to get going too fast where people are overwhelmed, things aren't being done well. You don't want it to stall, but just keeping it going and helping people also identify those small steps, because it can be easy to get overwhelmed by something. Even by a smallish project, you can get overwhelmed when you're already busy with other stuff. So finding for yourself and also helping other people find those next steps, those actions that they can take to move forward.
Well, and I think, like for me, I'm not going to be the best person to be the project manager because executive function is not one of my strong suits. But identifying the person who could be a better project manager, like you said, who kind of is organized and does like helping you with these processes, to be your body double if you're neurodivergent, to be the person to issue you a challenge to help motivate you to get your project done, or to, like you said, fight procrastination. You think it's going to take you days and days, but it's going to take you 10 minutes if you just sat down and did it.
Mm-hmm.
So having the right lead who can be the cheerleader, but also the sort of the taskmaster, I think is going to be important.
Yeah, I think having the right team and playing to each other's strengths. And I think some of the things that we think of as weaknesses sometimes actually help with. So I don't know if you do that hyper focus thing, but the hyper focus can really be a time where people can just knock out a bunch of stuff if it's interesting. Multitasking, I think, or being creative. I think that's part of project management too, is creative solutions, creative ideas in the first place. So I
Yeah.
think those,
So Rachel said she found trying to find that starting point for a huge project is where she's freezing up. And
yes.
it sounds like that work breakdown structure, the brainstorming,
Yep.
just nothing is out of bounds. Let's just talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and invite Darren. I'm sure he'll have plenty of ideas to share as well, Rachel. And kind of see if that helps bubble up ideas that they then can be organized or thrown away. It's like, maybe it's not everything that you want, but it helps identify the things you don't want,
Right.
so because that can be important too.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just really envision where you're going, and then start to look at how you're going to move from here to there. And I like the post-it notes because they feel casual, like writing out a bunch of post-it notes isn't as intimidating as if you use some sort of software and you start building your spreadsheet. Then you can be like not wanting to mess up your formulas or whatever. Where post-it notes, it's just a post-it note, easy to crumple up or move, or notice where there's repetition, or but I really, I think that's a great idea, Sharon. I think that's a great place to start. other things you're thinking about trying, or as you think about your projects, what's hard? So I've time management is something, like Sharon said, I'm doing a session on that too, and it's something I've thought about and talked to so many people working in libraries about, and I think we're often just too busy, and I think that things like this help us get realistic about how much capacity we have.
Considering we had somebody come talk to us about burnout and stress out at annual meeting in September, this is all just resonating. This is really resonating.
It's hard because there's always so much potential. There are so many things we could do, but we have to, I think, get better at being more realistic about, okay, well, how many hours will that take? And how many hours do we have available? Building in a good cushion. You always, with project management, and I think with time management in general, you have to build in that cushion because things happen that you weren't expecting.
Yes, like a contingency plan of, well, we think it's going to take a month, but let's give ourselves 2 just in case.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other things that people are thinking about? Sometimes if you're working with a contractor, they will have their tools that they use too, which is always kind of fun to see. And then you'll have your own pieces to add on to that. But I think that can help with people who have done the same type of project many times before. They often have good tools in place.
Well, I would think somebody at the city, like I'm thinking back to our friend Kim Beats, who built a new library at Bonner Springs, and it happened to be her husband who was the project manager of that. But they had Matt had his own set of project management tools because he was doing sewer projects, and the
Right,
library building project was just one more project for him.
right,
So maybe one of your stakeholders is your city, if you're a city library especially,
right.
and they might have some more tools and expertise to assist.
Yep. Okay. What's something you will try? What's one thing that you might try? I'm going to go back to the slide with all the stuff. So it sounds like some communication. Again, as I look at this, actually, I like several of these, but I would say project charter or any sort of just one page, get it out of your head and document where you're starting from. The work breakdown, I'm glad that you mentioned that, Sharon. I think that is a great one. Just that, especially the post-it note way of doing that, I think is a great way because it is hard. It's overwhelming at first to get started on something big. And then meetings, being thoughtful about your meetings and using them to keep the cadence going, keep the rhythm of the project, keep it rolling. And then closing, remembering to do something to close. Those are all the big things that I would emphasize.
Yeah, I had that, this is the song that never ends. It just goes on and on, my friend. That's
Uh-huh. Yes.
the never ending story is good too. But yeah, for me, it's the closing. You get so caught up in the next project, you don't finish. Yeah, I have a project that I started in 2021 and we still haven't finished it. So it just lingers, and then it
Yeah.
just stresses you out because it's like it's this looming, why haven't I finished this yet?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing I like best about all of this is, especially for those smaller projects that we would tend to carry in our head, that it gets us to get it out of our head, because I think that's when we feel just exhausted, is in part is because we have all these things in our head that we are worried we're going to forget, or we feel bad that we haven't made any progress on, or it's lingering with someone else. So I like that about getting it out of your head.
All right. Any other questions? ideas, suggestions? No?
Okay, well, I hope that this has been useful. I hope that you found at least one thing you want to try, and I'm excited to come back and talk next month, right, about time management with
Yes.
some tools that there's a little bit of overlap, but some tools that I think are useful for time management.
So for people that sign up for the time management, will it be helpful for them to have at least watched this if they didn't attend today?
No, I mean,
No?
sure,
Okay.
yes, there won't be that much overlap, and they can stand on their own, but
Okay.
yeah, I think they complement each other, but
They're
you
not
wouldn't have
dependent on
to,
each
they're
other.
not dependent, that's right, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Talk about time management. It's 10:57.
Woohoo, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good luck with the projects you're doing, and thanks, Sharon, for inviting me to do this, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.